once a year, you sit across from your manager. Maybe it's in this like slightly too cold conference room, or maybe you're just staring at them through a grid on a video call, and they look over their glasses and say, so how do you think this year went?
Oh, that question. It just makes your stomach drop.
Right. It's awful because suddenly, in that one single heartbeat, your past 12 months are entirely on the table. Every late night, every project you saved at the last minute, every miscommunication, it is all just sitting right there waiting for you to summarize it.
Yeah, and it is arguably the highest stakes professional conversation you will have all year. I mean, the pressure in that moment is just palpable because the outcome directly impacts your compensation, your trajectory, and, your daily working environment.
Exactly. The challenge is really figuring out how to advocate for yourself without sounding horribly arrogant, right? While, simultaneously handling their feedback without sounding defensive or weak. It's this very specific linguistic tightrope.
A very slippery tightrope.
Very slippery. So, for today's deep dive, we are treating this as your ultimate prep guide. We're diving into a stack of Harvard Business Review articles, linguistic studies on corporate communication, and modern HR frameworks to really extract the precise language and the mental models you need to survive and thrive in the annual performance review.
And a critical theme across all these sources is that a performance review isn't just about managing information. We like to think it is simply a data exchange, right? Just a rational review of metrics. But really, it is about managing emotion while navigating really complex corporate language.
Which is hard enough on its own.
Oh, absolutely. And this becomes exceptionally difficult for non-native English speakers or anyone who just feels inherently uncomfortable with corporate self-promotion, which, frankly, is a huge portion of the workforce. It just feels unnatural to brag.
Yeah, whether you are walking into your very first review or your 20th, having a specific linguistic toolkit is essential. By the end of this deep dive, the goal is to equip you with the exact words to instantly transform this, anxiety-inducing evaluation into a genuinely empowering conversation.
That's the mission.
Right. And the sources suggest the transformation begins long before you step into the room, starting with the self-evaluation document itself. So where do we start with that?
Well, the single most critical mindset shift required for any self-evaluation, and the verbal defense of it, honestly, is moving away from listing your tasks and moving toward demonstrating your impact.
Tasks versus impact.
Exactly. The human brain, particularly a manager's brain at the end of the year, is just suffering from decision fatigue. When you simply list tasks, you are forcing them to do the mental translation to figure out, why those tasks actually mattered.
I always think of it like listing tasks as like handing someone the blueprints to a car and asking them to imagine driving it.
No, that's good.
Right? It's technically accurate, but it's just exhausting to process. Demonstrating impact is handing them the keys. You want them to feel the momentum, not read the manual.
That is a perfect way to visualize it. Let's look at the linguistic difference from the research. A task-focused statement sounds like this. I managed the social media accounts and wrote blog posts.
Okay, sounds normal enough.
Factually true, sure, but it's devoid of value. An impact-focused statement sounds like this. I led social media strategy for the quarter. We grew engagement by 40% and launched 2 new content formats.
Wow, yeah.
Yeah.
You're showing them the result of the ingredients rather than just reading out the grocery list.
Right, you're serving the meal.
So most of our listeners probably know the framework the sources recommend for this, the STAR method. STAR, situation, task, action, result. It's like interview 101.
It is.
But looking at the sources, where seasoned professionals fail isn't the acronym itself, right?
Yeah.
It's the weight distribution of how they tell the story.
Yes, exactly. We naturally spend 80% of our time on the action phase because that is where our sweat equity lives. When we're nervous, we tend to over-explain how difficult a project was, detailing every single spreadsheet and late-night email.
Because we want validation. We want them to know we suffered.
Exactly. We want validation for our hard work. But in doing so, we completely bury the result. The secret is flipping that ratio. The STAR method isn't just a storytelling device. It is a mechanism for cognitive fluency. It structures the information so the manager's brain can process the value with zero friction.
But wait, doesn't using a strict framework like that make you sound robotic? Like you're just reading off a script?
You'd think so, but it actually does the opposite. The framework frees up your cognitive load. You aren't worrying about where the story ends or rambling on because you already know you are driving toward that specific metric like a 15% retention improvement. It actually lets you be more conversational because the structure is holding the weight.
Okay, I see that. So you have the structure, but how do you deliver it without sounding insufferable? Like navigating the art of the humble brag seems to trip up even the most talented professionals.
Oh, for sure. You have to advocate for yourself, but nobody wants to sound like an egomaniac. The trick lies in the introductory phrases you use to frame the accomplishment. The linguistic studies we reviewed provide this really diplomatic language that centers the work rather than the ego.
Give me an example.
So instead of saying, I was amazing at this project, you pivot to, one thing I'm proud of this year is, or something I feel I added significant value on was.
Oh, I like that. By using "I'm proud of," you are centering your personal feeling of satisfaction. It shifts the focus from an objective claim of superiority to a subjective feeling of fulfillment,
Right.
which makes it much more palatable to the listener.
Absolutely. Another highly effective phrase from the text is, the project I'm most satisfied with was X because of Y impact. And when you describe that work, the vocabulary really must focus on two specific concepts: being quantifiable and being proactive.
Quantifiable and proactive.
Yes. Numbers strip away subjective emotion and leave undeniable facts. Reduce processing time by 20%. Delivered the launch 2 weeks early. Numbers are the universal language of business value.
Okay, but I'm looking at this framework, and it makes total sense for, like, a salesperson dealing with revenue or a project manager dealing with strict timelines. But what if I'm not dealing with sales numbers?
Like who?
Like my friend who works in HR resolving internal disputes, or a graphic designer or an administrative assistant who's just putting out fires all day. How could they ever put a hard number on their work? Are they just out of luck with this method?
Not at all. If your role isn't intrinsically numbers-driven, you pivot your focus to the second key vocabulary word: initiative.
Initiative.
Right. In roles filled with what we call invisible labor, the day-to-day maintenance that keeps a company running, your metric of success is friction removed. Initiative means acting on your own to reduce cognitive load for your team or your manager.
So you measure your impact by the headaches you prevented?
Precisely. You use language that highlights how you improved processes or filled gaps before being asked. Phrases like, I proactively identified, or without being prompted, I took on.
Without being prompted. That's a good one.
It's powerful. Or even, I noticed a bottleneck in our workflow and suggested a new system, which the team adopted. You might not have generated $1 million in sales, but if you saved 5 people 3 hours a week because you organized a chaotic digital filing system, that is immense value.
Because framing it around initiative proves leadership qualities that transcend basic metrics.
Exactly. Now, once you successfully prove your impact and demonstrate how you've removed friction, you establish undeniable value. But a performance review isn't a monologue.
Unfortunately.
Right. Eventually, the manager has to speak, and often that means discussing areas for growth. The conversation shifts to the minefield: criticism.
Oh boy. The hardest part. Handling direct criticism and acknowledging your own weaknesses is where the entire meeting can just derail. When faced with criticism, the human brain literally undergoes an amygdala hijack.
An amygdala hijack.
Yeah. The amygdala, our threat detection center, perceives the negative feedback as a literal threat to our survival. Biological fight or flight kicks in. People either completely cave in and shrink, or they become aggressively defensive.
I've definitely been aggressively defensive in my early career.
We all have. So how do we bypass that amygdala response and stay out of both of those traps? The sources suggest a two-pronged approach, starting with preemptive acknowledgement. If you know you messed something up this year, you own it before they have to dig for it.
Right, take the wind out of their sails.
Exactly. But you immediately pair it with forward momentum.
And the specific phrasing the HR framework suggests here is, one area I want to grow in is X. I've actually been working on it this year by doing Y specific action, and I'd love to talk about how I can continue that development.
It sounds like you're essentially providing a linguistic shock absorber. You're saying, I know I have a blind spot, but look at the momentum I've already built to fix it. It disarms the manager completely because they don't have to convince you that the problem exists.
But what happens when the criticism is unexpected? Like direct, in-the-moment feedback that just spikes your heart rate?
The script for gracefully handling unexpected criticism while your brain is screaming at you is, that's fair feedback. I can see how that came across. What would have looked different in that situation,
Oh, wow. What would have looked different in that situation? That is incredibly strategic.
isn't it? It forces the manager to move away from attacking your character or your past actions and into describing a specific alternative action for the future. You are forcing them to articulate a solution rather than just dwelling on the problem.
It turns a critique into a coaching moment. You completely change the dynamic from judge and defendant to mentor and mentee. Another really useful phrase from the text is, I appreciate you sharing that. Can you give me a specific example so I can understand it fully?
But we have to address the elephant in the room, though.
Let's hear it.
What if you flat out disagree with the criticism? Managers are not infallible. They operate on bad information. Or they judge a decision without understanding the constraints you were under at the time. It is human nature to want to launch across the desk and say, you are completely wrong.
Oh, absolutely.
Is there a third option between swallowing an unfair critique and starting a confrontational argument?
The third option requires diplomatic restraint, and it relies on recognizing that fighting the premise usually entrenches the manager in their position. When you disagree, you do not attack their conclusion, you pivot the lens.
Pivot the lens.
Yeah. The de-escalation phrase is, I see it slightly differently. Can I walk you through my perspective?
I see it slightly differently. Biologically, that makes perfect sense. You aren't triggering their amygdala by telling them they are wrong. You are simply proposing that you are both looking at the same object from different angles. It is an invitation to collaborate on the truth.
Right. Another strong option from the linguistic studies is, I respect that view. I want to share some context that might be helpful here.
Let's analyze how this plays out in a real-world case study from our sources. The text details a scenario where an employee is called out during their review for causing tension with a design team in the first quarter. The instinctual, defensive response would be to assign blame. The design team was always late, so I had to push them to meet our deadlines.
Which instantly paints the employee as a difficult collaborator who refuses to take accountability.
Exactly. Instead, applying the frameworks we just discussed, the employee used a specific, multi-step response. They said, you're right to bring that up. I think I pushed back too hard without fully understanding their constraints. I've made a concerted effort to communicate better since then. I actually set up a standing weekly sync meeting with their lead to ensure we are aligned.
Notice the mechanics of that response. First, the validation. You're right to bring that up. Second, the ownership without extreme self-flagellation. I pushed back too hard. Third, the proactive initiative. I set up a standing sync meeting.
It's masterful.
It really is. The employee took a moment of conflict and successfully reframed it as a story about their own proactive leadership and growth.
And because you've established undeniable value through the STAR method, and you've handled criticism without triggering a fight-or-flight response, the entire power dynamic in the room begins to shift. By this point in the conversation, the manager can no longer just evaluate you, they have to negotiate with you.
Which is exactly why the final phase, making the ask, becomes possible.
Yes. Having demonstrated your impact and navigated the feedback like a consummate professional, you transition to capitalizing on the conversation. You have earned the right to ask for what you want, whether that is compensation, advancement, or resources.
But the language here must be polite, yet entirely direct.
Asking for a raise is notoriously uncomfortable. How do the sources recommend framing it so it sounds justified rather than greedy?
You tie the request directly to the impact you just spent the last 20 minutes establishing. The recommended phrasing is, given the measurable impact I've contributed this year, I wanted to raise the topic of compensation.
Yeah. Given the measurable impact.
Yes. Or, if your responsibilities have significantly expanded. I feel I've demonstrated value beyond my initial role's scope. I'd like to discuss whether my current compensation reflects that market value.
I love that. It separates the request from personal need. It isn't, my rent went up so I need more money. It is an objective observation. The value provided to the business has increased, therefore the compensation should adjust to match the market rate for that value.
Precisely.
And what if the goal is a promotion, rather than just a salary bump?
For promotions, the strategy is to use future-focused language that enlists the manager as a guide. I'd like to talk about what a path to the next level looks like for me, or I feel ready to take on more responsibility. What specific milestones would it take to move into that senior role?
You aren't demanding they hand you a new title today. You're asking for the map to get there. It shows ambition while respecting your authority to set the criteria.
And if the company is in a hiring freeze or budgets are locked, you don't just walk away empty-handed. You pivot the ask to development. Is there a mentoring program or a professional training budget I could access this year to continue growing my skill set?
The objective is to always leave the room with some forward momentum, even if it is just a formal commitment to your continued growth.
Always. But there is one final piece of the conversation we must address. What is fascinating in the research is that while employees endlessly stress over how to handle criticism, they are often equally terrible at accepting positive feedback.
Oh, it is remarkably true. When a manager says, your work on the Q3 launch was exceptional, the default reaction for many is to stare at their shoes, mutter a quick thanks, and pray the floor opens up to swallow them. They actively shrink away from the praise.
It is a symptom of that same discomfort with self-promotion, but shutting down a compliment creates an awkward dead end in the conversation. The strategy to employ here is to receive and redirect. You acknowledge the compliment fully, but you immediately tie it to future growth or team collaboration.
I always think of it like playing basketball. Just saying thanks and freezing is like someone throwing you a beautiful, perfectly timed pass, and you just stand there, holding the ball until the buzzer sounds. You kill the momentum. You have to pass the ball back into the flow of the game to keep the energy moving.
A highly accurate mechanical metaphor. To pass the compliment back into the flow of the conversation, you use redirecting phrases. Thank you, that project really gave me a chance to stretch my skills in data analysis.
Or, if others were involved,
You'd say, I appreciate that. It was a genuine team effort. The logistics team was instrumental in getting it across the finish line.
or projecting it forward. That means a lot to hear. I want to keep building on that momentum in the upcoming quarter. It validates their praise, while immediately pivoting back to the work.
Exactly. Okay, so we've talked through all these frameworks. Let's actually put them into practice so our listeners can hear what this sounds like in real time. Let's do a full sample dialogue.
Oh, I'm ready. Let's do a role play.
Okay, I will play the manager and you play the employee. Try to incorporate the accomplishments, handle a challenge, and then make your ask. I'm going to be a little bit skeptical, maybe a little intimidating, to give it some realistic emotional texture.
Perfect. I'll play the slightly nervous employee who remembers their training. Set the scene.
All right. We're in the cold conference room. I look over my glasses. So, looking back at the last 12 months, how do you think this year went?
Well, first, thanks for taking the time to review everything. Honestly, I'm really proud of what we accomplished this year. One thing I feel I added significant value on was the Q2 client onboarding overhaul. Using the STAR method, the situation was that we were losing 10% of clients in the first 30 days. So my task was to plug that leak. I proactively identified a bottleneck in our automated emails, rewrote the sequence, and as a result, we reduced drop-off by 20%.
Right, yes, the onboarding sequence, that was a solid improvement. But, looking at Q3, there was that whole issue with the missed deadlines on the marketing rollout. That caused a lot of friction with the design team.
That's fair feedback. I can see how that came across as disorganized. I think I pushed for too many revisions without fully understanding their bandwidth constraints. What would have looked different in that situation from your perspective?
Well, I think catching the delay earlier and communicating it to me before the deadline passed would have helped.
I respect that view, and I completely agree. Actually, I've been working on that exact issue this quarter by setting up a standing weekly sync with the design lead so we don't have those surprise delays again.
Oh, you set up a weekly sync. That's good initiative. I appreciate you taking ownership of that. Your proactive approach there is really strong.
Thank you. That project really gave me a chance to stretch my skills in cross-department communication. And actually, given the measurable impact I've contributed this year, especially with the 20% retention bump, I want to raise a topic of compensation and see if my current salary reflects that market value.
And scene. That was textbook.
Ew. Even just role-playing it makes my heart beat a little faster. But having the phrases ready completely grounds you.
It really does. Let's do a quick vocabulary focus recap for everyone taking notes, especially those using this to sharpen their professional English.
Yes, let's run through them. First, self-evaluation.
That's your own formal assessment of your performance where you must focus on impact over tasks.
Next, quantifiable.
Able to be measured with numbers. Grew by 40%, delivered 2 weeks early. The universal language of value.
Number 3, initiative.
Acting on your own to solve a problem before being asked. Removing friction.
Number 4, proactive.
Very similar to initiative. It means anticipating needs or problems and taking control of the situation rather than just reacting after things go wrong.
And finally, the STAR method.
Situation, task, action, result. The structural framework for telling an impact story, remembering to heavily weight the result.
To synthesize everything we've covered today, successfully navigating a performance review requires a complete linguistic and mental shift. It means abandoning the grocery list of tasks in favor of quantifying your impact.
It means utilizing the STAR method, not just as a story structure, but as a tool to reduce the manager's cognitive load, ensuring you spend the bulk of your time highlighting the results rather than the effort.
Right, and it requires deploying strategic vocabulary to demonstrate undeniable value. And crucially, having those diplomatic third-way scripts ready for the minefields of criticism.
Bypassing the amygdala hijack by asking what alternative actions would have looked better, or using the phrase, I see it slightly differently, to de-escalate disagreements without compromising your perspective.
For everyone listening, the ultimate takeaway is that having these specific phrases committed to memory removes the immense cognitive load of searching for the right words in a highly stressful moment. When you aren't panicking about how to say something, you can focus entirely on the substance of what is being discussed.
It transforms the dynamic from a passive interrogation into a collaborative negotiation.
It places you firmly back in the driver's seat of your own career trajectory. But before we sign off, I want to leave you with a slightly provocative thought to mull over. Extending beyond the corporate conference room,
Oh, I'm intrigued.
we've spent this entire deep dive analyzing how to apply the STAR method, impact metrics, and proactive initiative to your professional life. But imagine applying these frameworks to your personal life.
Wow, okay.
If you sat down with your best friend or your partner for an annual relationship review, what would your measurable impact look like? Would you just be listing your tasks? I did the dishes, I bought the groceries, I took out the trash. Or would you be able to articulate how you proactively removed friction and improved the relationship?
That is a fascinating way to look at it.
The language of undeniable value isn't just for business. It is the foundation of how we show up for the people around us. Something to think about the next time someone asks you, so how do you think this year went? And we'd love to hear from you. What is the hardest part of your performance review? Is it listing your achievements, handling criticism, or asking for what you want? Let us know.